Hello, everyone, and welcome to Book Break. Today, Molly and I are kind of breaking out of our comfort zone a little bit. We are going to talk about feel-good reads.
Yes, I blame myself for this because the last time Claire and I talked, all of our books were depressing. I think the three that I shared, I remember crying at the end of each of them as I read them. And so after we did our depressing books, which we really liked our books,
Yes.
I said, next time we should read feel-good light reads.
Yes.
And
I think what we discovered is neither one of us really like feel-good light reads, but I did find a couple that I liked, and I think you did as well.
Yep, I landed on three that I can honestly recommend. Went through a few duds.
Me too. I actually DNF'd or did not finish several books that the first thing I did was go through like a Google or ChatGPT, like what's a good feel-good read? And a lot of the recommendations I got, I am just not that kind of reader. So, like when people say, "Oh, it's good for the Midnight Library," lover, or A Man Called Uva, it's like, oh, not
yes.
me. Yeah.
Yes, I also found that I looked online for recommendations, and I asked a few kind of trusted librarian colleagues who know that I'm not a huge fan of romance, that I have a bit of a snarky sense of humor, and even some of those recommendations. There'd just be a few things in there that just kind of made it not a feel-good read for me. So I think, what one person considers funny, like if it hit a little too close to home for you, it could ruin the entire thing. And I found that with a few of my books. So there's a book for every reader, so hopefully.
Exactly. And hopefully some of the ones we'll talk about today might resonate, with our readers. So the first one I'm going to talk about was an actual nonfiction book. Mm-hmm. It's called Ordinary Time, Lessons Learned While Staying Put by Annie B. Jones. And it just came out fairly recently. I think it was April. Being a librarian, I love books. I also love hearing about books. And I listen to several book podcasts, including one called From the Front Porch, with Annie B. Jones, who is a independent bookstore owner in Thomasville, Georgia. And I live in Western New York, of course, but I'm probably closer in age to Annie's mother. But I still related to this debut book of essays, and I really liked it. I personally love essays and was happy that Annie used this format to kind of tell her story in memoir. And just a little bit about her life and thoughts. So she is originally from Tallahassee, Florida. She had dreams and aspirations of living in New York City and being a big-time writer, having a big career. But that's not where life took her. It took her down the road to Thomasville, Georgia, which isn't really that far from where she was from, and taking over a bookstore. And it's a book about staying when so many people choose to leave. So why did her sisters want to marry, leave their family? It's just I don't know. I really like the book because to me, being ordinary is being okay. And most of us are,
Right.
Most of us are not the big time writer that gets to go to New York City
not
and have
setting the world on fire.
Right.
As a librarian here in Greece, New York. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and she kind of had struggles with being an introvert. She has a very public-facing job, and I think we relate to that as well.
Yes.
There was one essay about reading the obituaries when suddenly they realize they haven't seen like a favored patron or, customer in a while, and I can really relate to that because that's happened to me a couple of times. She also kind of struggled with her church and trying to fit in there in her community. So she really, that just kind of resonated with me, these ordinary life struggles. So the book to me, felt like a warm hug. She seems very grounded and authentic. I read this one as an advanced reader copy, so I didn't get to listen to it, but I believe she reads it. And
Okay.
I like her voice on the podcast, so I'm assuming the audio book would be good.
Yeah.
I'm really hoping that one day I can visit her bookstore. They also have reader retreats, which I think would be really fun. They usually
really?
sell
like
out.
you go stay there.
Yeah,
and
you know,
like a little
go
hotel and
discover
like
a
read
small
books
town.
together.
And it's just kind of like in our culture of loneliness. Loneliness is kind of epidemic in our society. This book really makes you want to just break out a little bit, not just order online, go in, talk to people, kind of get some connection in your life. So yeah, to me, this was a feel-good book. I really liked it.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And, to say that owning a bookstore in a small little town, was a step down from her dream. I'm like, that is the dream.
I
to
know,
own the
I know.
bookstore in the small town. So,
Yeah,
that
although it's
sounds-
hot there in Georgia. I don't know if I can handle that for
I
the most
probably
part.
wouldn't like that part. But that bookstore sounds great.
Yeah.
Well, the first one I'm going to talk about is called The Love Elixir of Augusta Stern by Linda Cohen Logman. And this came out in October of last year. And I think this was a nice, heartwarming read. It blended a little bit of romance along with historical fiction, and it has a touch of magical realism in there as well. We meet our main character, Augusta Stern. She is about to turn 80 years old, and I believe the year is 1987. So she's 80 years old, but she still is working full-time as a pharmacist in a hospital.
Oh, wow.
Yes, she loves her job, loves helping out patients. She doesn't have any children, never got married, so she's kind of poured her whole life into her career. Now, she's been fudging her age a little bit for a decade or two at work. They think she's about to turn 70, but they have started to modernize, and they're putting all the employee records onto computers, and her supervisor kind of lets her know that they're on to the fact that she may be lying. So even though she doesn't want to, she reluctantly retires because she's almost 80 and she doesn't want people to discover that she's been lying about this for all these years. So she retires. She doesn't want to. Her niece convinces her that Florida is a great place to retire to, so helps her find a condo to buy at a nice, Rolantando Springs retirement community in Florida. So she buys the condo, moves down there. The first morning she's there, she's just about convinced herself that maybe this isn't going to be so bad. She's taken her morning swim. She used to swim religiously in New York City multiple times a week, but, the pool was crowded. There were screaming children. The locker room was chilly. The towels were thin and scratchy. And here at this retirement community, not many people there. No screaming children. Thick towels. Just feeling good. Gets out of the pool, and she hears this guy yelling, "Goldie? Goldie? Is that you?" She thinks, nobody's called me Goldie since I was a kid, a young woman. Who is this? It says, "Goldie, it is you. I'd recognize that tuchus anywhere." And it turns out to be Irving Ridkin, who, of course, is the one man she's ever loved.
Oh,
the
my.
last time she saw him, she was 18 years old. She thought she was going to marry this guy, but he abruptly left her without any explanation, and within a week had moved away, married some other woman.
Oh.
So Augusta never really got over this, never saw him again. And of course, there was no Facebook back then, so she couldn't stalk him online. This is 1987 when she meets him again in the retirement home. Turns out that Irving, of course, lives in the same retirement community.
Of course he does.
Yes.
Yeah.
So this book was fun because you get to see them as older people, but it also has a dual timeline that flashes back to 1920s Brooklyn.
Okay, so you get to figure out what happened and why it
how
ended
they
in the first
met,
place. Okay.
what happened. Back in the 1920s, Augusta was a teenager. Her mother had died a year or two before, and she lived with her father and her sister above her father's pharmacy. So that's how she became a pharmacist. The magical realism element comes in because once Augusta's mother dies, great Aunt Esther from the old country Russia moves in to help out with the household, and turns out great Aunt Esther develops a pretty good side hustle with the pharmacy patients, doing old school remedies, love potions. She has like magical chicken soup. And this puts her at odds with, the scientific pharmacist father.
Okay.
But Augusta is kind of equally fascinated by the science of pharmacy and the fact that great Aunt Esther seems to, really help people. So, there's disastrous love potion in there, and kind of what happens with that. But I think this was a good read. It would have broad appeal. I thought it went on a little too long, could have been edited up a little bit, but it was interesting to see both timelines, and Augusta was loosely based on the author's husband's great-grandmother, who was one of the few female pharmacists in the 1920s. And of course, that's not something that happened all that often 100 years ago.
That actually sounds pretty good.
Yeah, it was funny. Augusta is a little prickly in her old age.
Who doesn't like that?
Yes. But I enjoyed it. And also, I've never read anything by this author, but writing was kind of like a second chance career for her as well. She didn't have her first book published until she was 47. Had a career as a lawyer that, she wasn't really into.
There's a lot of lawyers that turn to a second career in writing. So.
Yeah. But I thought it was a fun book. I liked it.
Oh, good. Well, my next one is also about an older protagonist that kind of gets a second chance at life. It's called The Phoenix Ballroom by Ruth Hogan. And for 50 years, Venetia Hargrave's world pretty much revolved around her husband. She built her life around his big career, dinner on the table at 6, lovely home, dutiful son that was just as business-minded as his father. But now her husband has passed away, and Venetia is a very wealthy widow with a beautiful but empty home and an enviable bank balance.
I was going to say,
Boy,
the wealthy widow, that doesn't sound terrible.
But she has a distinct feeling that she's missed the boat. So once upon a time, she was a dance instructor, and as a matter of fact, this is how she met her husband. She dreamed about opening a ballroom school of dance with a fellow teacher who had won her heart, but instead, Venetia chose the safer path in life. So at 74, she's now declaring herself to be independent. First of all, she's doing a big makeover. She's worn like very conservative, very dutiful clothes, so she's getting some style. She adopts a dog, but something is still missing. One day, her dog walks by the river, and she happens to see the building that she remembered as her dance school. And now it's a community center and a kind of a spiritualist church center, which I'd never heard of that concept. The church is funded by a mysterious benefactor. So she's eager to try to find some meaning from her past, so she buys this Phoenix Ballroom. And she finds kind of like a supportive and loving community, one of those lost souls that all come together in families. So part of the thing what was funny is when her husband passes away, her son decides to get her a live-in companion because he thinks 70-something is just so old. So, and he has one son.
The dog wasn't enough.
The dog wasn't enough. So the grandson calls her the granny nanny. So, and of course she kind of has her own little story going, the granny nanny. Her mother has just passed away, but she has not inherited anything because there's like a very weird section in the will that requires her to do something that only the executor knows. So she's extremely frustrated by this.
Okay.
So she's left with nothing. She has nowhere to live. So she takes this granny nanny job because it has a pretty nice apartment that's separate from the house. So it kind of gets away with that I don't have any place to live problem. And then she decides that she really likes Venetia. She tries to help her make her ballroom dream come true. She starts doing marketing for her and some other things. So she's starting to
Okay.
find some meaning in her own life. And she was having an affair, I think, with a married man that ended very badly. So romance is like not on one of her,
It's not happening.
No, it's not
Okay.
happening right now. So what I liked about it, I liked that Venetia was not your typical kind of geriatric character. She's very spunky,
Yeah.
very witty. She uses Cher as her inspiration towards aging, so I thought that was kind of funny. Her granny nanny, her name is Liberty Bell. That's another thing. That was kind of
Quirky,
yeah,
cute.
hysterical. And the 10-year-old grandson, Kite. All the men in this family had bird names, which was a
Okay.
little strange for me, even though I like birds. So, and I loved her pet that she adopted. It was a German Shepherd, and she named him Colin Firth after her favorite Pride and Prejudice,
Actor, yes,
Yes.
yes, the wet pond scene.
So, the story was kind of predictable. It wraps up in a lot of little nice, tidy bows at the end. I thought the ending was a little bit too like everybody pairs off happily ever after type thing.
Yes.
So it would have been nice if somebody could have just found happiness kind
With
of
the
like
dog or
in
something,
themselves, right?
or their career choices.
But I thought
or
the whole
something.
ballroom dancing thing, I would have liked to have actually seen more of that. So
Yeah.
all in all, it was a nice light read.
Yeah, I think so many, when I started looking through the lists of what are these feel-good fiction, so many of them had that kind of like the lonely person, and then they find a family,
Right.
And I think,
Or older
like,
person that somehow
the man
makes over
called
their
Ove,
life. Yeah.
or I can't remember, Eleanor Oliphant. I think,
Yeah.
there's found family there, or the house in the Cerulean Sea. That seems to be a huge
component of feel-good books.
Yes, it's either a romance or you have that found family aspect.
Yep.
And that brings me to my second book, which also had a bit of the found family. This one was called The Keeper of Enchanted Rooms by Charlie N. Holmberg. And this is a cozy fantasy. It was recommended to me by one of our regular contributors on Monday Night Book Chat.
Okay.
And it has a bit of a historical fiction vibe to it. It is set in an alternate 1840s United States. So in this alternate world, there is still some magic. There's some enchanted houses. A small portion of the population has a bit of magical ability in their blood. But for the most part, life is kind of how it would be back in the 1840s in America, just with some magic thrown in here or there. Our main character is named Merritt Fernsby. He's a 30-something-year-old author. He's kind of like an absent-minded professor type. He's fairly isolated. He's been estranged from his parents and his siblings for a long time. And he's surprised when one day he learns, like so many people in these cozy type books, that he has inherited a house on a body of water.
Of course he has.
Why this has not happened to me in real life,
I'm still waiting.
I am bitter, but it happens a lot in these cozy books. So this house is on a very secluded island off of Rhode Island. And it's so remote that no one has lived there for over 100 years. And among other reasons, but
It sounds like a fixer-upper.
yes, which Merritt realizes, but he doesn't mind that. He's kind of a handy guy, and he's an author, so he can write anywhere, and he's sick of his landlord and sharing walls with people. So he says, okay, Grandma left me a house. I'm going to go check it out. And he gets there, immediately falls in love with this island. It's quite a journey to get there. But it's beautiful. It's right on the ocean. And to his surprise, the house is in pristine condition. It's charming. It looks great. Everything looks new. He says, okay. He walks in, and it all goes downhill. The walls and the furniture start to melt, and the eyes on the paintings are following him.
Oh, no.
And the door slams shut, locks itself, and no matter how hard he tries, he cannot leave the house. It is an enchanted house, which he did not know.
How does one get to Wegmans in this?
In this scenario, yeah. So luckily for him, there's an organization called Biker, which stands for the Boston Institute of Keepers of Enchanted Rooms. And this is an organization that has an inventory of all the enchanted houses left in America, and they keep tabs on them. And they saw that someone new bought this house and that this person has no magical background. So they had already sent out someone to help. So here is where Hulda Larkin comes in. She arrives at the house and finds a frantic Merritt. He spent an entire night alone, trapped in this house, and the house has done all sorts of things. The floor has disappeared in one of the rooms. The library is throwing books at his head.
Oh,
the
no.
dining room table has swallowed up his wallet. Dead rats are dropping from the ceiling. Like, it's really a nightmare. But Hulda, is able to talk to the enchanted house and say, we're going to work with you. Like, let me in. So she comes in and explains to Merritt that she is with this organization. She knows how to tame magical dwellings, but in order to do so, she needs to move in and help him. They need to figure out why this house is enchanted, what its source of magic is, and to work with it. And she says, you can live in this house. We just have to figure this out. So she moves in. Of course, the mystery of the house grows. It's not as easy as they thought. And as the mystery grows, of course, the relationship between Merritt and Hulda also grows as well. Now, this is a fantasy, so there's a few things in this book that I wouldn't say are lighthearted. Mm-hmm. There's like a big, bad, evil wizard character named Silas Hogwood, I believe, who does some pretty gruesome things that are described, but it's all kind of in good fun. And at the end, there's a big finale where they, face down the big bad wizard. And I thought this was a fun book. It had the cozy fantasy vibes. It had a good magic system. The romance didn't irritate me. So often the romances irritate me. But I thought this was a fun book. It's the first in the series. I think the series is called Wimbrel House. The fourth one just came out about a month ago, and I think book number 5 is supposed to wrap it all up.
Oh, good.
But it was fun. I liked it. I think it was probably the favorite one that I've read for this lighthearted read.
Well, that's good. I forgot that there was something that kind of, when you said that something bad happened in my last one to Venetia, that kind of made her switch to that safe path. So, yeah, just a little trigger warning there. But, all right, my last one, I'm definitely on the old person kind of bent here,
Okay.
except for the first one. The first one was a young woman, and it was a nonfiction, so that was different. But my last one I just read recently, and it's called The Correspondent by Virginia Evans. It's a debut, and it just published on April 29th.
So really new.
Yes, very new. And this one was, and I hope I say this right, epistolary novel. So a novel written in letters. It's all written in letters. And the letter writer is Sybil Van Antwerp. So we pretty much learn of her life through these letters to all kinds of people. She writes to famous authors. She writes to deans of University of Maryland, where she's always trying to audit a course.
Okay.
Some of the authors she's wrote to was Ann Patchett. She wrote to Larry McMurtry, and some of them have responses in there too. So she's prolific. This is her preferred method of communication.
Okay.
To everyone, to her children, to her family members. She's divorced, employees, and just different people that she meets in her life. I found myself getting really angry at times with Sybil because she really had an inability to communicate directly with those she really loved.
She had to do it through letters,
Yeah, so she
not
has
face to
a
face.
kind of a trying relationship a bit with her daughter. Her husband is estranged, they divorced, and you come to find out that they had a child that died in a tragic manner. So you begin to understand this, but then you also realize there's a lot of unresolved kind of emotion and guilt and tragedy in her life that she needs to come to terms with. So you do find out all through these letters she has a very good friend, and one of the things they always do is, well, what are you reading? That was the way they signed off the books, or started their next letters with all these different books they read. The setting
And
was
are they
in,
like actual books that, we've heard of? And
yeah, a lot of them are. So I would say that if you really like The Power of the Written Word, if you've read like other novels that are written in letters, like 84 Charing Cross Road.
I never read that.
Oh, that's a really good one. That
No.
was like 2 booksellers. I should have talked about that one for this because that's
Okay.
another one I really like. If it's never, you feel like it's never too late to change or never too late to make those changes and communicate in your life, and you love the question, what are you reading? So you do find out that there's some letters that are not written to anyone and it says does not send. And you realize in the end like who those letters are to.
Okay.
And there is some positive things that finally happen. Like she does reconcile with her daughter.
Okay.
Her ex-husband, something happens there, but you do feel like she's gotten some resolution. And the funny thing is while all of this sad stuff is going on, she has 2 different suitors. She has a guy that's in her neighborhood that's always trying to bring her baked goods from some of these bakeries in Baltimore or getting her to go, like local places.
That sounds good. Yeah.
And then she's got this rich dude in Texas who wants to fly her out there and is obviously interested in having a very serious relationship. So she's juggling all that too in all of these letters. So that's kind of
Local
funny.
baked goods guy
Yeah.
or rich out of town guy.
Yeah.
That's rough.
Yeah.
I almost need to read just to figure out which one she went with.
Oh, and
or
by
maybe
the way,
she doesn't go
she's
with either
also-
and gets a dog.
This one of the reasons that it's extremely pressing for her to get all of this resolved is she's going blind.
Oh no.
So here you have this person who really depends on the written word for communication that has a genetic disease
boy.
where she's losing her eyesight. So although this sounds like a
Yeah,
real
I was
downer
gonna-
of a book, and people are saying, Claire, you really cheated. You brought us a downer book, but
It kind of reminds me of our Grease Reads that we just had.
Yeah.
The Collected Regrets of Clover, which if you read the general description, it was, for those of you who don't know, it was about a death doula.
Right.
So, death is a main part of that book, but really I would have called it a feel-good read. Like it was heartwarming and yeah.
And
So
this lady's sense of humor was kind of witty and acerbic. So if you like that kind of, she was also an attorney, so she had a lot of interesting work situations, very different for a woman of that age, kind of ahead of her time.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I thought it was really good. I liked it.
sounds interesting. I'm not 100% sure, but I think I saw this on maybe April's best books of the month through Amazon or
Yeah.
May's books. Somewhere I've seen buzz about it. Well, the last book I want to talk about is nonfiction. It's called Pets and the City, True Tales of a Manhattan House Call Veterinarian by Dr. Amy Addis. And this one was published last summer. I hadn't heard of it, but it showed up as one of Washington Post's 5 feel-good summer reads.
Oh, nice.
And that's what I was looking for, and I love animals, so I picked it up. So it's the result of this veterinarian's 30-year career going house to house or apartment to apartment in Manhattan. And her husband really kind of encouraged her to write this book because so many nights she would get home from work and say, oh boy, wait till you hear what happened to me today at work. So
It's a modern-day James Harriet set in New York City.
Yes. Some of the things she comes across would not have been things she has witnessed would not happen in sweet James Harriet world, but adds a little modern day interest. But it really is, about all sorts of people. So, of course, it's more expensive to have this veterinarian come to your house. So a lot of the stories are about kind of like upper crust Manhattan, wealthy people, but she does go all over the city and see diverse people, all walks of life, incomes. But some of the fun stories are definitely about the rich and the famous, almost to the point where I got a little tired of the name dropping. It's like, okay, I get it.
Are they real people that
Yes.
she's talking about? Oh,
yes,
okay.
real people. And I guess, some of the names of just the normal people have been changed, but anytime that the celebrities were mentioned, she did get the okay from them to talk about them. But, she talks about Billy Joel, Joan Rivers. She was friends with Steve Martin, Wayne Gretzky, so there's quite a few people. And one of the stories, I have to laugh because you mentioned Cher. One of the stories was back in the early 2000s. Dr. Amy and her husband, they were getting ready to go to the opera at the Met. They kind of live what I felt was a glamorous lifestyle, but getting ready for the opera, and she gets a phone call, and it's from one of Cher's assistants. They are in a plane flying on their way back from Italy. They're going to land in New York City at around midnight. Cher has picked up this street dog in Rome because if you have a private jet, you don't have to worry about quarantines or any of that pesky border stuff. And this dog has a rash and is itching like crazy. Can Dr. Amy meet them at around midnight to check out this dog?
Okay.
It's Cher, so she says, okay. Goes to the opera. As soon as the opera's over, catches a cab. Gets there, is disappointed that Cher is not there. It's just the assistant, stretch limo, the dog, but she's there for the dog. So dog's name is Pippo, I think. And diagnoses the dog with mange and has to give the dog a shot. Tells the assistant, make sure you tell Cher to limit contact with this animal because it's a skin disease that can be passed from the dog to a human, so you don't want this mange rash. So don't share a bed, towels, limit contact. Assistant says, okay. So she says, I need to come and give another injection in about a week. Talk to you then. Cher is still in New York City, staying at some fancy suite in the Waldorf Astoria. So she goes there a week later, still is disappointed that it's just Cher's assistant and the dog. No Cher in sight. Dog is looking better. She gives the dog its second shot. The dog screams bloody murder, starts howling, gets very upset. And in the door from the next room bursts Cher, and Cher is mad. She says, what the hell are you doing to my dog? And Cher is only wearing the hotel bathrobe. She's got her hair up in big curlers, white goop face mask on. And so Dr. Amy says, it's okay, the injection just stung, your dog's looking okay, but, stay away from the dog for a little while longer because she's still contagious. You don't want to get this rash. And Cher said, what? Rash? She says, like this, and she flung off her bathrobe, was naked underneath, said, is this what the rash looks like?
Oh, no.
The assistant hadn't told her anything about staying away from the dog. And it turns out Cher did not have mange. It was some other heat rash. But, it's that type of story that makes this book entertaining. It's kind of funny. Also, again, it's about pets. And we know pets don't live as long as humans. So there is a little bit of heartbreak in this book because you have to put pets down. Also, obviously, there's sick pets. But overall, these are kind of, really nice stories about how that special bond between humans and their pets. And, it's a fun read. And I enjoyed it. I I love dogs. It also gave a little bit backstory of how Dr. Amy became a vet and started going, doing house calls. And I thought that was interesting. And she talks about her rescue pugs. And I have a couple little mixed pug mutts myself. So
There's a guy on Instagram who takes pictures of dogs called The Doggist, and he has a book coming out. It's Ezra something. He has a book, I believe, coming out in June called This Dog Will Change Your Life, and I really want to get my hands on that one.
Yeah, I like this one. I read in some of the reviews that some cat people weren't as thrilled because it was definitely dog heavy.
Yeah.
But cats do make an appearance.
Okay.
Cat urine ruins one of the author's dates. Cats got their time too, but definitely more dogs.
Okay. All right. So believe it or not, it is that time of year when we do one episode per month coming up. So June, July, and August. Our next episode is going to be a summer preview. We're going to talk a little bit about the books that we want to put in our beach bags, or like you were saying, just have by our lawn chairs out in the backyard.
Yeah, not a beach person.
Yeah, so we're going to give you a preview of our summer reading challenge and spill the tea on some of our prizes. So hopefully you can check out our show notes if you would like a list of any of the titles that we talked about today, and it will have links to our catalog. So happy reading, and we will see you in June.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.
Book Break is a production of the Greece Public Library, made possible through the support of the Friends of the Greece Public Library. Theme music composed and performed